another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and once again, I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had their life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, a rare part two, but this might be one of those cases where the sequel tops the original. This is like a Godfather 2 of podcasts. Julien Baker is back on the show, and I think this is like the third longest episode ever, and it's got to be one of the top 5 best episodes. More on all this in 1 second, but first, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and guest booker extraordinaire, Tristan Abraham, and he will get the message to me, and we can communicate that way. I love you, Tristan. Thank you for all the hard work that you do on this show. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Left for Damien. If you want to support the show, the best way to support the show is just by telling everyone you know about it. You can also subscribe to it and rate it where you're listening to it. You can head over to patreon.com/turnedoutapunk, and thank you to everyone that does do that. And check out the stuff we do over there and support the show that way. And speaking of support, this show would not be possible without the kind, loving support of the fine folks at Vans who came aboard a few years ago and said, Damien, do this podcast. Do it with all your heart. Just don't pay for it out of your own pocket. And they've helped me cover the cost of this thing, and it helps. It really, really helps. And so I got to say a huge, huge thank you to them for believing in this thing. And that's it. All right. If you're looking for stuff to do, check out over there at floodmagazine.com for Punk as Fuck, Punk AF. It's a series of videos that I did a couple years ago walking around LA, meeting up with people, talking about punk rock. There's some cool people that have been on the show, some people that haven't been on the show. But I guarantee you, if you enjoy this podcast, you will love these videos over there. And also the band I play in, Fucked Up, has a brand new... I don't. It's a song, but it's like an hour and a half long, so it's like an album long song. Anyway, 3 chapters are out, and there's a 4th one coming very soon, and there might be someone involved with today's episode involved with that song. That's I don't think we've announced that yet, so that's a little bit of a hint. But I think we talk about it in the episode, so. Spoiler alert on that one. And yeah, so Fucked Up has those new songs. You can check them out over there at bandcamp.com, and they will be available other places, down the line. But for now, that's what we're doing. I think that's it for plugs. All right, on to today's show. Today on the show, Julien Baker is back. And if you have not listened to Julien's part 1, I don't want to say stop what you're doing right now, because listen to this, but definitely go back and check that out, because it is an incredible conversation. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of Julien's work, and including her new record, Little Oblivions, but also having her on the show every time, as you will see by this episode, it's just one of those really profound, deep conversations that, I walk away from and I wind up still thinking about it, weeks later. I have to share it with you all right here. There's nothing more really to add. Go out and check out part 1 with Julien, by the way. Definitely check out Julien Baker's part 1 on Turned Out a Punk. But also check out her new record, Little Oblivion. She is an incredible lyricist, an incredible songwriter. And yeah, this record really reaffirms that. And I think that's it. No more notes for this at all or nothing. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Julien Baker on Turned Out a Punk. Julien, thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Yeah, I'm very honored that you asked me on for a follow-up episode, because I enjoyed speaking to you so much previously.
Well, actually, going back, I always say your episode's one of the best episodes that I've ever gotten to do on the show, but like going back and listening to your episode, there are so many things that you bring up, and you put things so, like, obviously you're an incredible lyricist, so it should be no surprise, but like at the same time, you put things so succinctly and just like almost these perfect sound bites listening back that I'm just like, oh, and I do this podcast Footnotes with Chris O'Toole, and where we just dissect the episodes afterwards. And after we did your episode, there's so many things that you brought up that we just were like, mulling over and discussing and these sort of talking points. So yeah, I've been waiting for this to happen for a long time. Thank you.
Oh, of course, it's my pleasure, completely.
Well, I guess I got to start off with one of these sound bites that you threw out is this idea of Green Day doing, and you this is how you put it, which is I think is so beautiful, the concession of pop culture, and this idea of an artist at a certain point, not just, like obviously you're doing it for commercial gains, but at the same time, there's also the idea that, you have to concede something to make that leap.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I've been thinking about that concept so much and how people think of commercial success and punk credibility as, I don't know, antithetical to each other. And I don't know if I would still think, like, I respect Green Day as a band. I feel like I've been talking about Green Day so much, but they truly did, like, that's just the band that, hey, I know this is going to be edited, but my manager just called me twice in a row.
Oh yeah, please take. Do you want to take a break? And
can I?
Yeah,
yeah. Can I just? Sorry, because he
Yeah.
doesn't ever do this, and I feel like
Yeah.
something's. Yeah.
Please.
Hold on. I'll be right back. Sorry, bro. He like butt dial repetitive called me, but you know when someone calls you like
no, I get it.
I'll
No,
ignore.
please. Do not
I will
worry.
ignore a person's call once, but then if they call me twice and especially like a third time, I'm like, something fucked up is happening.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. No, that's like
it's
an emergency
basically-
breakthrough. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a crime these days to like call someone without texting first or having a like a previously agreed upon plan. But anyway,
I get it. I get in trouble all the time for calling people. Like I got friends that make fun of me. I got these friends that do a
for
wrestling
cold
podcast.
calling.
No, yeah, just cold calling them and saying what's up. I got these. They do a wrestling podcast, and I've heard them make fun of me on the air for doing it. Like, not even like bringing me up as a weirdo who calls people.
That's so sad. No, I wonder if it's like I'd never know if it's me or if it's the other person like who has weird boundaries, but when I get a call from someone, I feel instant fear. I'm like, "Oh my god, I have to interact. I really don't want to interact with anyone right now." I'm becoming it, and quarantine hasn't done any favors for my hermit behavior. So
I feel like it's brought us all, though, to my level. Like, welcome everyone to having to talk on the phone. Aren't you glad I kept you all in practice?
yes. No, totally. I mean, and it was like, it's weird because throughout quarantine, I know this isn't what we originally started talking about, but throughout quarantine, it's been actually like emotionally taxing to have every interaction with a person mediated through a screen, and it has made me reevaluate like what parts of making music are even important to me or enjoyable or fulfilling. I don't know, because have y'all been writing like most of quarantine?
I tried.
No?
I wrote a little bit. I tried. And only recently have I been able to kind of get back to being motivated to write. But yeah, like when we started this thing, I was supposed to be flying out to do lyrics for a new album that just kind of got
Mhm.
shelved. And then we just started working on this project that that obviously, thankfully, you are involved with as well. But like that we started working on like 5 years ago. And we're like, oh, well, let's just do this other thing. And I'm grateful that we did, because I wasn't able to write. I don't know about yourself, like how hard that was, but I found it impossible.
Really? I found that, I mean, I wrote a bunch. Like, I was working on a score for a documentary, like, right at the beginning, like, last summer. And then after that, yeah, I mean, I just didn't know what to do without the mechanism of tour, because that's been the force moving my life forward and kind of the sole focus of all the tasks I have to do in a day. And so without that to return to, I just play music in my house and make demos all day and try to make myself better at like mixing and engineering, just so I can be a little bit more competent in that realm. And it's been really fun. But yeah, I've found it's been really fulfilling for me. And like, I don't know, I guess it just depends on like how you feel most comfortable writing, or like what's going on in your life. Because I'm sure it's like, I don't know if I had children who were in school and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life now that the world was turned upside down, if I would have the mental bandwidth to write. But the only thing I have to take care of is my dog. So I'm like, I've got some more flexibility in my obligations in my day.
Well, I think that's because you're a natural writer. Like, I don't mean to put this on you. I don't know if you are, but like from the outside, it looks like you're a natural writer. And I feel like I'm much more a performer, and that sort of loss of the performance side of things. I'm not a natural writer. It takes a lot to get there. And I feel like and especially with the kids, like it really called into question, like, well, what happens if I never am able to perform again? Like, what, I wish I learned to play guitar.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. And I think I've been really aware of the distinction between, I mean, not to say that that a person can't be both a musician and a performer, or a musician.
I'm sorry. I realize I didn't mean that in any sort of way. You are an incredible performer. And like,
no. That's not what I meant. I meant that, like, I actually don't know, like, because this is the first time that I'm playing with a band again since Boy Genius, and then like before that, I hadn't played in a band in many years, which was always super weird for me because I hustled so hard and worked for years to try to promote my band and like buy a little like online billboard screen header for 30 seconds on some music blog and like toiled away trying to whatever make it. And then the record that I got recognition for was oh my god, my roommates are screaming, I'm sorry.
It's okay, do not worry, but it's gonna be my cat screaming in a minute, so
it's the ambience, the Foley of quarantine workspaces. But yeah, and so then I like was performing alone just because that was the entry point that I finally had into being a musician as my career, because I knew that I loved music more than anything else, and it was the thing I was passionate about and the thing I wanted to give my life to. But then, I don't know, it became, and I don't think I realized this until I started playing with a band again with Lucy and Phoebe, but it became really taxing, the performance part, when it was a one-sided conversation between myself and the audience, and there was, outside of Camille or Aisha playing violin with me, there was no musical conversation going on. There was nobody else to play off of. It felt, the setup felt very narcissistic, but also very lonely. And I'm realizing now that the part about, like, the thing that is enjoyable about performance to me is the cooperative nature of it. And I don't know, I've been reworking some of the old songs with the band because I don't know if that's the kind of music that I want to play anymore, because I really just want to make fun music with my friends. That's what makes performance tolerable to me, because what I don't know, I find I'm fulfilled by writing songs, making them, putting them together, making something beautiful with my hands or with my voice. And then, but it's like, unfortunately, touring is such a huge staple of how I make a living as a musician, you know? So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the one thing I really took from it is the idea of like, yeah, like the performance, like you could definitely do a performance now in front of a webcam. Like, you know, people have been doing a lot of that. I don't think, I think for me, it's definitely like you're saying, that cooperative nature of live performance where that audience is also an equal part of the show. Like, you know, obviously I'm a well, I don't know. Obviously, sorry, I probably punished you with it last time. I'm a wrestling fan, and watching, I can't really watch pro wrestling right now because they don't have the audience there. So it's just so, it just totally changes the experience. In the same way I find watching live streams with bands, it feels like I'm sitting in their practice space watching some other band's practice.
yeah, no, totally. It was really hard. Like, we did a release show where we played a set that was mostly new songs. And when I watched it back, I was like, yeah, that's critical of my own performance, and I feel like I could have been tighter, but I always feel that way. But also, I was like, man, is that how I am like on stage all the time? Like, I just felt like I'm already kind of, maybe it sounds ironic to say shy on stage because my whole job is performing basically, but I feel like, you know, banter and interacting with the audience and speaking in front of a crowd instead of just playing the songs they expect me to play is very difficult for me. And I think not playing shows for so long and having music be a private, intimate pursuit and then playing to an empty room made me even more like reclusive and not low energy, because it was honestly very, very gratifying to be able to just be in the same room as other musicians and playing music. But yeah, it looked different and a little sterile to me.
I think we're not even at that point yet in Canada where we can even go back, or at least in Ontario, into the same room with each other. So I think that would even be different. It was more that kind of performance where everyone's in that complete, like, separate bubble, separate world where everyone's looking straight into the web camera, trying to, you know, it just, that type of performance to me was something where, yeah, like I totally reassess, like, what is it that I do? Like, and it made me really appreciate being able to go and play for any size audience. Like, I go back, and if there's only like 12 people there, buckle up, 12 people, because you will get the show of a lifetime.
Oh my gosh, that is exactly how. So, in the touring lineup will be a little bit different than what we've been doing for all the like live pre-taped video stuff, but Calvin, my very good friend who I've known since I was like 14 maybe, who also produced this record and the last one with me, Calvin is playing bass, and Matthew Gilliam, who was in the Star Killers with me, who I've also known for like a decade, is playing drums. And it's really neat because the thing we've bonded over is how like thrilled we will be to play for anyone in any venue. Like, we've just been so starved for it. And I mean, I can't think of a show that I have not taken seriously or been disappointed about, because I don't know, it's just not in my nature to be bummed about a show that like anyone anywhere is playing, or that anyone anywhere is coming to see and giving a damn about. But I think I will cherish the shows extremely. Like, I don't know, I don't want to get emotional about it, because that's been almost the topic of conversation for all the musicians in my life, and like all the interviews I have done. Everybody is like, I miss tour, I miss shows, and that's like all anybody can talk about constantly, even though we all know that we miss tour and we miss shows. But I don't know, it feels like a community mourning its chance to get together. Like, you know what I mean? It's so isolating. I truly think music is a communication tool, and it's something that is experienced within a community, and it's very weird to have music be isolated to a single viewer.
Yeah, I got to the point where I would say that I hated touring. You know, I would constantly say that in interviews. I'd be like, oh, I love being in a band, I love playing the shows, but I hate the act of touring. And I don't know if it was like fear of like the intimacy of a show on some weird fucked up level type thing, but like I think I was just so scared by how important this thing was to me that, you know, thinking that it would always go away on some level, that only now that it's gone away do I realize, oh, the reason I hated touring is because I fucking loved it and because I was living all my dreams and it was just too much for me to understand and appreciate.
Wow.
So I'm airing this shit out to you right
No,
now.
it's fine. This is what we should. Okay, because I think about that all the time, and honestly, we started talking about whether you necessarily have to forfeit or concede something to pop culture or just to the machinations of labels and booking agencies and press teams. Like, if you necessarily have to do that in order to be successful, but I guess then it's like, well, what is successful? If you want to be like commercially successful or be able to sustain yourself with the art that you make in a unfortunately like super capitalist consumer society, is that something that you have to do? And I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot because I felt really bad. Like, there was a part of me when I was touring alone that would text my friends from, like, my boys from Forrester and would feel like such a traitor. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there is an expectation to like, especially in punk world, and this is something I am continuously reevaluating. But there is an extreme loyalty to a specific set of like moral codes and expectations that I think, even if they were fine and supportive with me doing the solo thing for a while, I still couldn't ever reconcile it with myself. And that's why it makes me so happy to be like playing, like Matt is playing in the band. And it's like, you know, Creech has a kid now. Austin's doing other stuff. So the landscape has changed, and now it's a matter of me trying to look at all the concessions I've made and the compromises, or maybe the elements of myself I have changed, and wondering if that ultimately benefited the people in my life more, or if it was actually more advantageous for me to become a solo musician, because now I occupy a very different space than I would have with a band. And it's very important to me to be able to use that platform and like the modicum of power that I have in this world to try to affect real change. And I don't know if I would have had that otherwise, but there is still, I don't know, this extreme intense loyalty that I feel towards my Memphis people, my boys.
Well, I guess bringing it back to what you're saying, there's almost this concession to pop culture that you
Mm-hmm.
give, right? Like, and it's and it's not like it had to be this way. Like, it wouldn't have been able to happen otherwise. And even if it had happened otherwise, the way the music media is, they kind of force you to become the focal point as the front person of a band.
Especially when you're a woman.
Yeah, I can
Especially when
only
you
imagine.
are a woman that is fronting a band of straight white dudes.
Mm-hmm.
I think then you're expected to, like, somebody I think about a lot is, like, this is gonna sound name droppy, but she is just one of my good friends. But Haley from Paramore became so, like, all of those musicians are extremely talented. Not least of all, Haley as a songwriter, as a musician. But then it seems like, I don't know whether this happened naturally or whatever, but it's like the performance of her as a front woman became like the whole ethos of that band for a while, which I think, I don't know, and I'm seeing a lot of people do this. Like, I think about Brandi Carlile too. Like, I just watched one of her live streams where she's like, yeah, I was in a band with the Hanseroth twins, and we were going to put out a record as a band, and a record as Brandi Carlile, and basically just talking about how she had been friends with these two dudes from the, like, DIY Seattle scene, and then put out, like, a commercially viable record that did super well, and how, like, the story is written by, like, maybe objectively her most popular song, but is, like, written by one of the twins. And I just, like, I don't know, I'm looking to older musicians now for, like, an example of how they've mitigated that tension, I guess. And I think, like, Haley and Brandi are two really incredible examples of people who effusively praise the people around them and try intentionally with, like, their performance, how they speak in interviews, how they choose album artwork, how everything, it's like they are so intentional about bringing the focus of music back to a community in the context of a band, even if it's like, I don't know, Brandi Carlile performs under her own name and still is like, this is a band. Maybe I'm just getting super gushy about it because I haven't had the chance to be with with my full band lineup boys from Memphis, or with Phoebe and Lucy and have, like, band camaraderie. I've been doing music alone for
Mm-hmm.
a year, and so maybe that's why I'm waxing all philosophical about it now. But
No, but I definitely, feel that as well, like how it just is, and obviously, I experience it differently being a, straight white dude, but, like, I feel that they just pulled, like, there's a reason I'm doing a podcast. I certainly don't know the most about punk and fucked up, and I'm probably not the smartest person in fucked up, but there's a reason I'm doing the podcast as the front person. So, I'm just trying to say, like, I guess, when it happens, it's all about how you use your platform, and you need these artists, right? Like, you need artists like yourself to kind of make it. And, like, there's one thing about, I don't know, Daryl Jennifer, when he was on the show, talked about the Bad Brains and the ethos that was different between the Bad Brains and Minor Threat. He's like, Ian wanted to be local. He was okay with Minor Threat being a local band, whereas to me, Bad Brains were a revolution, and I wanted to take that revolution all over the place and bring it to as many different people. And, like, I think if you apply that to even the business sense that these two different bands had philosophically, it's amazing how, you know, and obviously there's other reasons, again, like commercial success, but like at the same time, it's also like if you think of yourself as trying to get a message to as many people as possible, you got to do whatever it takes to get that message across. Like, look what Chumbawamba sabotaged their career to get that 15 minutes of fame to try and talk about the message to people.
Dude, yeah. Well, and I think about like System of a Down writing about real like intense political stuff that is going on where they're from, or like I mean Rage Against the Machine is like Zach De La Rocha bringing crimes against the United States, like war crimes, like accusing them of war crimes. I mean, accusing, not as if we don't know that the U.S. commits hella war crimes, but that's what I like. Those bands are massive. And I know that there's no way that they got to be massive without making decisions that were beneficial for their career, even if they were profit or commercial success oriented. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, like, that, because that very rhetoric has been deployed at me as a justification when I don't want to do something, because I feel like I can be stubborn. It's a personality trait. I try a lot to work out, but I'm sus of everything. Like, every opportunity for self-promotion that gets offered to me, I'm like, I don't know if that feels right. But I guess it has something to do also with taking up space, because when I was in a local band in Memphis that was like doing Weekend Warrior stuff to St. Louis and Detroit and Chicago and Nashville, you better believe I was fine with taking up space. I was paying for my bands to have ads on. This is gonna out me as like, I don't know, a scene kid or like emo revival kid, but I paid for my band to have an ad on Pup Fresh, the blog.
Well, I actually watched a video of you did like on social media trying to get a little bit of money to put out a split record for Star.
Oh my God, our Indiegogo. We were trying to put out a split with Little Moses. Yeah, we were like actively out here creating, like, we were doing the very same things that I'm doing now. We were trying to create content. We were trying to engage with people over social media. We were trying to get people to share and buy our record and support it. And I think I felt much less grimy about that when I was doing it with a band, because it felt like I was advocating for something larger than myself. But I don't know, it's been a difficult thing for me, and honestly, I don't know, I just kind of try to take it as an ego death whenever I just bite the bullet and I see that like there's a bus ad with my face on it or something that I know is like paid for by, I don't know, the label or press or whoever, and it makes me cringe because it's just my name, and I feel really weird about it. But on some level, it's like, why didn't I have any qualms about this when I was scratching and clawing for anything for the Starkillers, you know?
No, you were you're speaking my inner monologue back to me type thing. Like I definitely get all this. I know, and I think that's why I found it so hard to write. Like, I was, during this time, I was like, we had this whole record planned out and I had all these lyrics written, and then it's like, well, who am I to take up space now with this, you know? Like, especially we live in an era where, you know, unlike when you're putting out those videos back then, like, we live in an era where information is completely democratized, which means the song and the album that, you know, we work years on is worth the same amount as this podcast is worth the same amount as some random like Twitch video sorry, that's how old I am. TikTok video is worth as much as like
Twitch is still a thing. I'm not on
TikTok,
right. So we're old. Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah, you're right.
Oh no, I was just gonna, as a major news story too, which is like important information too. So it's just like, unless it makes it now, like I feel like if I'm not going to say something important, I don't want to say it.
That is exactly how I feel. I mean, that's why I feel like interviews have gotten harder for me the longer that I've been an artist, because I keep getting asked questions and I am so hyper aware of the fact that, like, man, do I go here? I'm gonna do it. Okay, so, like, I don't want to make other people uncomfortable, but I feel most at ease when I am trying to be as transparent as I can, because then I feel like I have less to hide. But like, a thing that goes through my brain all the time, and because I talk about this with my friends who are musicians who are like cis straight white dudes, I'm like, man, I understand that it benefits the publications that I speak to and the people that praise my music, because I can afford them some legitimacy as an artist who is openly queer and who is a woman, and like is a part of, like, I have these parts of my identity that make me marginalized in whatever way. And it is, to whatever extent, like, now it is more fashionable and honestly lucrative for those people to praise queer artists. And so I have this whole monologue of like, and on top of that, it's like, man, I have people that work for my label and me that have relationships, and I'm not, this isn't diminishing the value of their work or the authenticity of it, but it's something I can never get out of my brain, that I'm constantly aware of. It's like, there are people that work for my press, and I am afforded this platform on some level because I can afford it financially, because I was in a position for whatever reason. Like, I don't know how much it has to do with my actual talent. And so I've tried to stop, and this is a great way to meander back into a conversation about punk music, because I think understanding that and kind of zooming out from how contrived music now is, I can recognize that my music doesn't have to be a work of genius or a amazing revelation or a tour de force to be worth something. That's kind of the whole thing that's attractive about punk music, is that it's easy to play because it's ugly. I mean, it's not like, it's ugly in a good way, and I'm sure you know what I mean, but
totally, yeah, absolutely.
If you drop tune your guitar and slide your finger around some bar chords, you can write a song and express yourself, and you don't have to be formally good, and you don't have to be highbrow, artistically gifted. You just have to have the desire to put your feelings into a microphone and into the world at a show or on a little cassette tape or anything. And it's like, yeah, now that I understand that that is the value of music, and that I don't have to be compliant with this super competitive I was going to say a competitive competition, but I mean like this world where it feels like people are competing for recognition or seeking validation. Like, when I understand that I am just a drop in the bucket of or like a drop in the ocean of a culture whose tides are constantly shifting, I can take my own art less seriously in a way that makes it more fulfilling to me, and in my opinion kind of returns me to interacting with music the way I did when I was a child. And I think, I don't know, that's important to me.
No, I definitely get that. It's amazing how, like it's I think we need that ego to survive it too, because you need that ego to protect you. Like that is also
Mm-hmm.
like a self-defense you have to build up to protect you from, and like once again, this vitriol varies very much depending on who is the artist in question, but the vitriol that you get from people that are insecure by your success, and I mean that like on every level, like just people that want to give you bad reviews for whatever reason, or people that want to lob just like, oh, they're a sellout or type thing, like these sorts of type things at you, is because that's why you need this sort of defensive ego that also makes you overvalue your own work sometimes, and not like I'm saying this, what I mean when I say you, I mean me.
No, I get it. It's the one.
Us. Yeah.
Yeah, us. Um yeah, I mean, and it's like I don't know what else to do. There's part of me that is constantly thinking about projects that could make it less of a single person focus. Like my music, like I don't know, like what if I started making records for other bands, or I just had a whole bunch of people do a collaborative record all together. And when I remember having this conversation about the freedom of success allowing artists to be eccentric. And that's not always the case. I mean, there are certainly artists who are weird and oppositional and countercultural and radical without success. But I do think there's a lot of artists where I can observe their trajectory from making music that kind of did okay, conceding to whatever the mechanism of the music industry, gaining stability as an artist or power or wealth, and using that to do something really weird. You know, like I feel that the freedom that comes with being commercially successful, best case scenario, will make an artist feel, and I don't know if it's out of complete freedom or like just responsibility to do something weird, and because you know that you're being observed. Like that, I don't know, that's kind of how I feel now, is like I want to, now that I have made all of these compromises, use the power it's afforded me to do something that is inevitably going to be hyper visible, to influence music in a good way. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
that sounds like such a Miss America answer, but I'm like, that's the only way I can think of mitigating the punk guilt.
It's,
You know?
well, it's so funny to hear you talk about, or not talk about, but to hear you describing yourself as an artist who's made compromises, because I would describe you as a very uncompromising artist, like one of the most uncompromising artists when I hear your music. So it's interesting to hear, but I think that's, all of us have to do that. Like, at the end of the day, there's like last time you brought up, like, why was, like we were talking about, why wasn't it 15? Why was it Green Day? It's because Green Day was willing to make the compromises and the sacrifices to and I'm sure, honestly, I'm sure Billy Joe deals with his guilt. Like, I've never met him, but I would love to
Yeah.
talk to him about it, because I'm sure he does on some weird level, even in spite of all the millions, kind of goes, geez, I bet Tim Johannen's still super fucking bummed, even though he's dead.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. I mean, and it's so difficult for me too, because there is a certain level of chaos to it as well. Like, imagine if, I don't know, I was at a show, somebody suggested my music to Sean, who at that time ran 6131. I got signed to that label. I got some more resources. I kept making music. You know what I mean? But what, I don't know. I could have been at some other show, and somebody else could have been playing that show. Or I could have been friends with someone different that wasn't friends with Sean. Or I could have not gone on X or Y tour. Or I could have gone to Cincinnati instead of Columbus, Ohio. I don't know. There's just like so many things where I feel like I'm able to continue to challenge myself as a musician because I was given resources. And I always wonder, like, what would happen to the artists that are brilliant and undiscovered that I listen to if they were just given resources. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to I'm not going to like force you the whole time to talk about like the redistribution of resources in the music industry by punk people.
No, this is the best. This is the best. Every time you come on the show, it's like the best conversation, Julian. Like, this is incredible. Like, I've got a list of questions I want to get to, because like anytime I do a part two, I get so anxious about doing these part twos because
really,
I'm so well. I kind of like hide behind this format, you know, because I can just kind of like ask people kind of like all these nerdy questions I have, but it's almost like there's a structure to it, you know. But when someone comes on for a part two, it's like that's when it's like, what are we going to talk about? But like, so I have a whole list of things I wanted to talk to you, but I haven't even had to scratch any of these off the list. Like, some of them come up naturally, but the rest of them, I'm like, this is just an amazing conversation. No, but I think what you're saying about this idea of I don't know, like, why is it us? Like, why was it this band? And you know, my band hasn't achieved the success you've achieved, but like, I think, you know, there are plenty of artists that have these resources, that have these opportunities. So many people that have come on this podcast, and there's just something about what they were doing that, and maybe it's just a timing thing. It might have nothing to do with them as songwriters, but it just doesn't connect, and it doesn't hit that emotional chord.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think separates, like, that's why it's bands that find success, is because they can hit a chord. And like, you know, like, I used to like agonize over the fact, like, why the Offspring? You know, why them? And it's like, oh, because they hit the chord at the right time. And like, they were, of course, you know, much more in the zeitgeist than Neurosis was, you know, for what was going to hit with people in a big way, you know? So I had a video TV show for a second. And I honestly thought the day I played the Cro-Mags on TV that it was going to cause like this musical revolution, and like no one was going to listen to like, I was delusional. Like, I was smoking a lot of weed, and I just got into weed, so that might have something to do with it. But I was out to lunch because I honestly thought that was the case, and not realizing like, oh no, there's something so much deeper about why artists become the artists they become in other people's minds, and it's because they've got this emotional connection with an audience.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I've been revisiting a lot of the music that I listened to when I was a kid, and it's really clear to put it into the categories of like, this is stuff I liked because this was speaking to my experience at the exact right time and perfectly articulating feelings and thoughts that I had, but I wouldn't. I was just about to get into, I don't ever like to organize music hierarchically, I guess. Like, I don't want to be like, this is bad music, this is good music. But there's definitely music that I wouldn't suggest to people now. Like, oh, this is one of the best songs I've ever heard. Even if it was like a song that was extremely significant to me at the time. But it's, I don't know. It's it's difficult to think about.
One of the most like profound things that you brought up last time, and we got to last time, was this idea of like punk as a faith, and this idea that it fulfills that role in people's lives where it can become almost like it almost becomes like like a doctrine to people, and like it does become a faith, and the idea that you will you will shun people based on their level of faith. You're like, how deep
Sure.
do they go?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, that's. Ooh, I knew that I brought that up, and it's funny because I like shortly after we did that podcast, I radically changed the way that I think about faith, and I think it's not that I got more skeptical, but it's just that I wanted to try to be more discerning about the investment I put in a faith tradition and how that's different from the pursuit of knowing God, whatever that means, or like being a good person. And I can see that paralleled in punk as well. Like, I went through a phase where I thought, very early in my life, where I thought that to affirm yourself as a punk kid, you listened to punk music and you went to punk shows and you said punk things. Right? But now I'm kind of like, I feel myself, and I don't know if you feel this way either, but I feel myself, especially, it's been exaggerated from quarantine because I don't get to like go to the DIY spots here and see who's opening for the one band I know and find all these little ways to branch off into like what the youths are listening to. But I feel more and more I'm 25, and that's not like super old at all, but I do feel
No, not at all.
I feel distance.
You're the youngest person on the show in a long time.
I know, that's why I'm trying to be careful not to put my foot in my mouth, because I feel
no, you're like one of the smartest people that's been on the show in a long time too. So
I'm aware of punk history, or like the history of hardcore, and I've had people in my life share like older bands and explain why they were significant and like walk me through things I had no idea about. But now I feel myself becoming alienated from whatever the DIY scene looks like right now, which I'm sure there's not much of it, because I guess I would be correct in assuming that the progressive ideology holding punk kids are going to be the ones who really don't want to have a show with a bunch of people and aren't trying to bend the rules. So. Yeah, it's you would hope so, but and I don't know, I'm trying to relinquish my ownership of that world, or like my fully identifying with it, and understand that punk is a lot more, it's a much more mutable concept than I thought than I would have said before. Like, I think that there's not even necessarily so many. Last time we talked about hip hop and punk music, and I've been thinking about that so much, just watching, like, I mean, my friends from Memphis get into like Little Peep and like SoundCloud rappers, and hearing the things that those rappers are speaking about and the topics they're addressing and the lives they're leading, and being like, this is just Blink-182 energy with drum machines. You know what I mean? It's very much like chaotic, authority averse mayhem, and like a fuck the world attitude, but also like these little disclosures of deep sadness and deep pain, and it's being told told in a dialect, I guess, or like a musical style that I am so outside of that I'm like very that's very foreign to me, and yet I think it's accomplishing many of the same things that the music I listened to when I was a kid, the like pop punk or punk rock music I listened to did for me. So I don't know. Where are you with that? I don't want to be like I'm feeling myself getting old, but I am feeling myself much more be like, oh, I don't know like the house show band that's popping off now, and I used to only know those bands. And yeah.
It feels like that happens to, I think, everyone at a certain point where you do have to kind of like, and this is obviously very different right now because of the situation we're in, but like where you do have to kind of give it up to the next wave. And that's what keeps punk alive. Like I think in the way that there's always going to be, and there's definitely lifers that, but I think every band eventually you age out of it because you're gone a lot, you're touring more and more. And I think that's, why there is that renewal. But I think you're right. Like it definitely, there is a cultural shift. I'm though like surprised, like constantly surprised about how much still trickles back. Like Playboy Cardi put out that record this year and it's got the Slap ripoff cover.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And like, there's like these kind of like weird connections to it. Like you said last time, like that's the best thing about punk rock is kind of the idea that the lessons learned are going to be passed down, and that's what's going to be shared.
Well, I mean, it's like Trippie Redd put out that record where it's like half trap music, and then it's called. This is also a very like house show band album title. It's called Pegasus Neon Shark versus Pegasus, and then there's like I'm like, bro, that's the most like there was a house show band that had a song called Manifest Destiny Ate My Homework in Memphis. And I'm just like, yeah, that's exactly that ethos. And half of that record is like weird, polished, not weird, but like super polished pop punk guitar riffage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know. Now that is I don't know, I was alive at a time where that was almost exclusively what I listened to, and it was very of the moment. And now that it is an homage to something, or it's like derivative, or it's a flex, or just a window into that artist's music taste, it makes me feel, for the first time, like I'm actually able to observe the waves. And I was thinking about this yesterday. I was like on a run listening to, I'm gonna theoretically produce a friend of mine's band's record, which I've never done before.
Awesome.
So I hope it goes well. I'm really non-confrontational, so I'm probably gonna be the worst producer ever. I'm just gonna be like, whatever you think, it's up to you, which is like not a producer's job. But I was listening to like the reference mix playlist, and there were songs on there that were artists from the 70s that I had never been aware of. There were songs on there that are artists from this year and last year that I had never been aware of. And it was this relieving kind of... It was very perspective bringing. And I say it was a relieving experience because I instantly, like when I would hear like 2 or 3 songs on there, and I'd be like, oh, if you like this song, I bet you'll like, I don't know, Y Oak. Or if you like this song, I bet you'll like Land of Talk. And bands that are maybe a little bit more my era. But then also it's like, I don't know, I was just listening through this playlist wondering about what each song meant to the people in the band, and like who picked what and who brought, like, I wonder who suggested PJ Harvey to these people, because nobody ever suggested PJ Harvey to me until I was in college. And I'm sure that like with them there's other stuff that maybe they would like that has slipped through the cracks that I might be able to share with them. And then even if it's not me making the music, it's like I have been invited into this dialogue with a band about the things that influence them and the things they want to do, and the bands they admire. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of like being a conduit for a current along a little circuit. You know, I'm trying to let go of myself as needing to have the best taste or know about the real hardcore bands or to know about all the old school lingo, and I'm trying to look at myself as a person who's just one more diode in the like schematic that has that, like, when music is transmitted through my human lens, it takes on a slightly different character, and it then informs the taste and the creative output of the people that I share that with, even in a conversation. And that to me is like, I don't know, I just love talking about music. That's like, yeah. And I do this all the time. Like with you said it was like cold calling people, but what I do, my weird thing is I don't know how to interact with a person and make like small talk about bullshit. So with all of my friends, it's basically just like me sending them unsolicited Spotify links, because music is such a safe space. Like when we can just be like, yo, isn't this song a bop? Yeah, let's talk about like, oh, cool drum sounds, or wow, like that's a weird production element. Like I feel so comfortable and so at peace in those types of conversations because they're the least loaded, but also somehow the most significant to me.
Yeah, I think because punk was like one of the last places where information was a commodity, you know, mm-hmm. and you could like hold that over people. And, you know, nothing has been more sobering for what is music taste than having kids where, you know, they don't care about any of these rare records I got surrounding me. They don't give a, they're like, oh, that sounds all right. Like whatever. Because just like you don't need to appreciate music and hold on to music in the same way. And it's going to be less and less like that, you know, like I think obviously you'll still love music and you still need music in your life, but you don't need to understand the connective tissue in the same way that you and I do, you know, like I don't think people are going to be researching it in the way that we do now.
Oh, really? So you think like with I mean, I agree with you to some extent that when we're not, and this could change, but when we are interacting so much with our music and the connective tissue, like you say, is largely based on, you know, whatever X or Y streaming services algorithm decides should come up in related artists or frequently searched for together, instead of, I don't know, reading articles about your favorite artist in like whatever Revolver magazine or like whatever it is, like it when we're physically observing those bands as they come through your town and you see them change and you see who they're touring with, which still happens. But yeah, I agree. I think maybe it has to do with the fragmentation of genre, and I don't know, I think that's quickly going to become a really obsolete way to characterize music. But yeah, and you know what, that kind of makes me sad though. It makes me sad because when I read articles about what my favorite bands were listening to and then listened to those bands, I guess there's still like playlisting and stuff, but I think it's just like so much higher of a volume of information to try to consume when anything is at your fingertips basically for like $10 a month, you know?
Yep.
It's
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, sorry.
No, I was done.
Have you heard that Nirvana song written by an algorithm that came out? Terrible.
I wish we had cameras on so you could see my like shoulders just go slack with disappointment. That makes me so sad, dude. Come on. No, I haven't, but I'm gonna have to look it up after this conversation.
It's done for a good cause, like it's done for some mental health charity initiatives type thing, but it's also it is not good. I heard someone I saw someone dunking it online, calling it like a puddle of mud. The name of the computer was Puddle of Mud, which I thought was very
Oh my
apropos, 'cause
god.
that's
I do know the band Puddle of Mud. They got kind of dunked on for doing. Did they do a cover of Rape Me? It was for some. It was like I really don't like to shit on bands because I think it's mean and they're all out here trying. But yeah, I know about Puddle of Mud.
exactly.
I went to see Puddle of Mud at Memphis in May because Memphis in May loves to book some butt rock artists, and it's like I would see them and Saving Abel. I saw Hinder, fam. I saw Daughtry open for Hinder.
Oh, what a lineup! Oh my god!
Yeah, what a lineup indeed. I mean, but honestly, at that time, again, I'll say this, and it relates a little bit to what we're talking about, like the ambiguity of punk. When I went and saw Daughtry and Hinder with my dad, I was stoked, and my dad was stoked, because I was like 13 years old. I was hungry for anything that sounded like rock music or anything that was punk adjacent, and this was the music that was playing on the radio and was playing on the TV, and I didn't have a ton of resources outside of the t-shirt wall at Hot Topic and my friends to learn about new music. So, I mean, of course, I was just thirsty for anything. And then for my dad, it's like, he didn't have any more. It's like, this sounds like the closest analog to the music he would have liked and connected with as a child when he was like listening to Whitesnake and Billy Squier. And that I like I whatever about those bands like personalities, I know nothing about them, but just like to see that they were able to take up a space in the culture that made both me as a 13-year-old and my dad as a 40-year-old regular guy just happy. I was like, yeah, you deserve to get to take up space. So I'm like, I don't beef with butt rock as much as I used to. I think I used to be pretty pretentious about it, but
yeah, and as much as I would never listen to Puddle of Mud or any of those bands, like they have made a lot more people's lives a lot happier than my band ever has.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally.
But anyway, back to the reason I bring that up is just that I don't think the algorithms are good enough yet. Like I would never, through playlist and algorithm suggestions on a streaming service, find out that about your love of Pez or that you liked Madball. Like that wouldn't. It's just not advanced enough. And at some point, maybe it will be. Like I don't doubt that there will be eventually an algorithm that will write the best Nirvana song ever, and there'll be an algorithm that one day will suggest like the second Pez 7-inch when I'm listening, to Hardline on a streaming services. But like until that day. I think that's why I'm kind of bummed about the shift. That's the only reason I'm bummed about it.
I don't know. See, I think I disagree with you. I don't know. And this is, of course, me as a human being holding on to the illusion of my own uniqueness and specialness. But I doubt an algorithm being sophisticated enough to connect all of those dots. And I think what is more likely to happen, we're just like weather people of the future, so I don't know if this is true. This is just like what I would expect to happen. I think people will swing back in the other direction of the pendulum. Like I think there's already so much, and it's not even just about streaming music. It's about everything. Like, I mean, there was a documentary called The Social Dilemma on Netflix, a streaming service, about how streaming and social media and constantly being online is mentally and emotionally destructive. And people have that awareness, and I think there, as much as we can benefit from it, I think there are limits to it that will force people to always want to engage with music or with art or with just other human beings on a more genuine level. That said, though, what creeps me out about the algorithm is sometimes it's dead on. I'm like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I want to listen to. Like, I do actually like this band that I've never heard of before, but then it almost becomes... I was having this conversation with someone earlier, like, instead of there being a radio DJ who plays you a song and then talks about why they selected that song, you just have a sort of talking head, faceless information dispersal where it's like, here's a playlist that has been categorized by mood or genre, or it's like early 2000s pop punk or 80s hair metal. And then you don't have any further context for why those songs were selected or any anecdotes about the musicians or the players. And there's also like an artificiality of taste. Like, the cool thing about a radio show is that a radio show, or just like your friend suggesting you music, is that their taste is different from yours. But I find that the more sophisticated that these algorithms and more specific the playlists become, it's not actually stuff that challenges you, or I don't know if that makes sense. You know, it's just like a playlist full of things that obviously I'm gonna like, but that I don't have any further investment in because they've just all been compiled into songs, like a group of songs that are sonically similar.
Yeah, no, you don't force yourself to like stuff anymore. You don't have the commitment to physical format that, like, where you'd be like, oh well, I bought this, I don't really like it, but I'm going to listen to it till I kind of like it because it costs X amount of dollars.
Straight up. And I feel like such a, like, kids these days, but yeah, you don't have to force yourself to like stuff anymore. And I think, like, for me, even buying 7-inch singles and like albums, LPs, wasn't the only way for me to get music as a child, certainly. And I mean, it was for my mom, and she would be like, you know, I didn't have an iPod, I didn't have hundreds of songs when I was your age. But it's really easy to see now that it's been a decade. Even though I had like an iPod that could hold thousands of songs, I every song individually costed $1. Yeah. And I would like pine for and beg for iTunes gift cards, and then I would just like buy a handful of songs from bands that I wanted to check out, and if I didn't immediately like the song, it was like, okay, well, you're SOL, because that was the $5 you had. And if you were like me, who wanted to be listening to music all the time, I would just keep listening to songs even if I didn't like them, and not make myself like them, but like spend enough time with the music that I could see its merit. Or maybe something that didn't initially click with me started to click because I had a limited amount of songs to invest my time in, and now I have no limit at all, really.
Yeah, and I find it also, because of the no limit thing, it makes me less adventurous. You know, it's like the same problem that people always bring up with streaming services, where like they're like, oh, I'll just watch Friends again, or like I'll just watch this thing I've watched 1 trillion times. I find that with music, like I go back and I listen to the same song over and over again, just because like it's almost like, oh geez, there's just so much choice, might as well just go to the thing I know.
Seriously. Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, it's harder for me to I guess it's just the same thing. It's harder for me to find new music that I am genuinely super excited about, I feel like it's not that I've become jaded or calloused in any way, but that just happens less. And at first I thought that it was because I, like, whatever, I'm getting older and my, like, threshold for being moved by music is higher. I don't think that's it, though. It's like I just statistically encounter so much more music than I would have been able to ever a decade ago.
Yeah.
And so I find myself, but then also I don't want to, like, I feel super bad when I just, like, skip through songs, because it's like, I don't know, that artist made a whole record and put this single up and supported it, and then I clicked on it because it was suggested to me, and I wasn't really all about it, so I just passed it. And then I always have this like FOMO, like, what if I am missing out on this artist that I would love, but I just haven't found them because panning for gold in the riverbed of all the grains of Spotify artists is really time consuming, I guess.
Yeah. Have you ever watched that John Peel documentary that they made just before he passed away?
No.
He has this one part in it where they're talking to him, and he's just in this room full of records. Like, it's unlike any personal collection I've ever seen. And he's just frantically listening to all these records. But like you're saying, he's almost like picking up the needle and just quickly going through it as much as possible. Like, and just being, and they're like, and he's just talking about how his big fear is when he dies, not hearing that song that would change his life. You know, like, there's stuff out there that he's not going to ever hear. And I remember just how mortal I felt hearing that, you know, on tour, just being like, holy shit. Yeah. Like, this isn't my music, as much as I pretend like it is, and I'm going to hold on to it forever. Like, this is all going to keep going when I'm gone. And it's there's something very humbling and sort of sad and scary about that all at the same time.
For sure. No, and I think as much as I used to kind of advocate for streaming services and Spotify and Bandcamp's a little different, but just for the sake of this argument, like, it does kind of bring the rungs lower, or maybe it, like, puts more rungs on the ladder so that there's less hurdles to getting your music into a space where it can be heard. It's not like you have to get on a major label and wait for them to distribute your record to a record shop and hope that the guy suggests it to his customers. You can just put it on the internet. And in some ways I think that's great, but it does come with that very sad, like, well, you know what? I don't know if it's sad, because kind of the same thing that I was talking about with understanding how temporary my time as a musician with any recognition is, makes it so much easier to value music as an ongoing community pursuit that maybe, however big or small my band is or the music that I make is, it will influence the way somebody else writes songs. It'll be a penny in the jar of their full ethos. Like, I don't know, there's so many bands that influenced me that just never played outside of Memphis or Nashville. And it's like, but then they became cornerstones of my musical taste, and cornerstones of my musical identity and how I engage with songwriting. So it's like, I don't know. I don't want to get all emotional about it, but that's the contribution that I find solace in.
Well, and you have, you know, not become Green Day in any sort of way, because obviously you've done something completely different, but you've done that same sort of thing, because after you were on the show for the first time, there's so many people that reached out to the show talking about how important of an artist you are to them, and getting them into this kind of stuff. And just, by you being on this podcast, how many people checked out other people that were on this show from punk rock,
That's
like
awesome.
but it's like, it's and I think about, your bandmate when she's on Saturday Night Live, and like how important when you're on big talk shows, like how all this stuff is, like how big these things are and these moments are for actually changing people's lives.
Totally. And I think, Phoebe is a great example because she's obviously succeeding is an understatement in her individual music career, but it's also like she has a label. She uses her power to reallocate resources to people that are making good music that are like maybe younger than herself. And I think, it's like Lucy does the same thing, like being very intent upon like treating, I don't know, bands that she admires well, and like they're great models of human beings to be around. But yeah, I don't know. I think that you get to a point where you recognize the limit, even if I were like selling out arenas. There's a limit. There's a limit to how much staying power that has. And it almost becomes arbitrary after a while. And like, I don't know. It just makes me think about like why you or I even started playing music in the first place. And that's a very like back to basics type of thing. But I think if you don't do that, if you don't remind yourself to have a little self-imposed ego death and reevaluate your motivations for playing music, I think you will absolutely get jaded and unhappy. It's like, it will happen to you.
I think it's like you're saying, like at the very start of this long conversation. By the way, this is an incredible conversation. Anytime you want to come back on this show, please know it'd be an honor to have you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
But back at the very beginning of the whole thing, when we were talking about the concession to pop culture, where you lose control at every stage, like we talked about Rage Against the Machine, like Rage Against the Machine, like Zach would have had so much more control over his career in Inside Out, and like, when Phoebe's on Saturday Night Live and all of a sudden she's getting shit from David Crosby, like a guy who of course is never going to get it, like he's not going to get it. And all of a sudden you're like, you don't have the control over the audience that you do when you're playing to basement shows or like community space shows.
Well, and I think it's because first of all, that David Crosby comment made me so fucking mad. I was like, bro, are you serious? Person literally, like, I don't know. That whole situation made me really upset. I was just like, I don't understand why everyone is mad. Like, it took me like several days to get to the bottom of like the tweet that started it. I was like, because when I saw the performance, like, of course we like all like wanted to see it and stay up and watch it. And I was like, my first thought was, that's the most badass, like, that's punk. That's super punk. Like, what? So what if it was planned? There are artists who take like 50 guitars on the road and smash a guitar every night. It's gimmicked. It's planned.
Yeah.
The point is the optics of it. And the point is like asserting herself as a female musician taking up space and doing rock and roll shit on national television, on Saturday Night Live, for Christ's sakes. And to me, it's like that's the most rock and roll thing. I don't see how anybody could have a problem with that. But anyway.
Go ahead. That platform too, Saturday Night Live, there's so many people that come on the show that talk about that B-52's performance, or I'll talk about that Rancid performance, or like the Rage Against the Machine performance. Like, that thing and Phoebe's performance will be this too. Like that thing will kick off the next wave. And like, yeah, like people talking about it's contrived. Like it wasn't fucking contrived when Nirvana did it every show for like an entire career.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's, gosh, I think signaling is not always bad. Like, virtue signaling, but also like having a specific message that you're trying to get across with specific imagery. And honestly, not to just keep talking about how fucking brilliant Phoebe is, but I try not to be like up her ass all the time because she's my friend, but I'm like, damn, she is a person with an extremely focused vision, and like all of the signals that she sends with imagery and how she carries herself, and like down to the clothes that she wears and the way that she behaves on stage and the things that she says are like, I don't know, when Nirvana is smashing a guitar every night on stage, is it contrived or is it half planning to have a time where you showcase very real passion and rage? You know what I mean? Like when I think about, and I think about how that line sometimes is so thin. Like I remember going to, maybe I talked about this on the last episode, so I don't want to repeat myself, but when you talk about how you have, I don't know, not less control of the audience, because, I don't know, I'm sure everybody at like a Taylor Swift stadium show is like in the palm of her hand because they all spent like hundreds of dollars to go see Taylor Swift. But I think it's not that you have less control, maybe it's
less commonality, maybe.
Yeah, I was looking for the right word, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but it has to do with like, so I remember we were on like our first little baby tour. My dad was with us, and we played at this dive bar in like Columbia, South Carolina, and we stayed an extra day because the next show got canceled, which like half the shows got canceled. And we saw this band Defeater, and I loved that band. It was like Defeater, Touche, Law Dispute. When I was growing up, those were like the kind of the all-stars of the like post-hardcore scene. And I remember seeing that band play, and I don't know if it's even true if he cried, but I remember somebody being like next to me after their set was done being like, he cried, that was so awesome. And it was the first time, because we were just like exhausted. We had played a show at the same venue but to like 3 people, not, you know, it was like they filled out the 400 cap. So we had played at the same venue, and I was just like, man, I don't know how I would feel if somebody said that it was awesome that I cried, because it's actually emotionally taxing and very physically demanding to go to that place during a live set. And so like, when I think about the fact that when artists grow and become more widely recognized, the tours get bigger, the crews get bigger, the set gets more dialed in, maybe it gets a little bit more flexible, maybe things are less fluid. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Now when I perform, there's a lot about the performance that's very calculated, and there's transitions that we work out before, and it's because, I mean, for me, A, it's higher stakes, but B, there is a point where the larger the body of people witnessing you, I think the easier it is to do this hive mind detachment from the performer as a person. And like, when you're watching your hometown screamo band play a floor show, and your buddy is like walking straight up to everybody and screaming in their face, you feel that. And when you see somebody performing for hundreds of thousands of people, it becomes much more difficult maybe to expect the same kind of emotional transparency, because imagine what that would take for the artist. Yeah, but so at that point, it's like, once you get to the point where you're playing beyond the intimacy of house shows and floor shows at a basement, or it becomes, and again, I'm speaking from my personal point of view, the things about my life and about the live show and about my musical career that have become more calculated are because there's so much more at stake. I don't want to if I flippantly said something kind of like rude or sarcastic into the microphone in front of 15 people in my hometown, then yeah, they would just be like, Julien was pissed off. I don't know what was up with her tonight. But if I behaved that way, or I was like much more cavalier with the messaging that I'm sending to people listening to my music now, I don't know. It just it leaves a larger wake. Even though I'm aware that, like a wake, it will eventually disappear, it still matters. And so I just feel the need to be more meticulous, and I don't know, but I guess my point in explaining those two thought processes is, I don't think something being calculated necessarily has to mean it is disingenuous. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I think about Kurt Cobain a lot. It's just like almost like, like, why would you want that success? And obviously not to undercut the horrors of the battle that he had with addiction or mental health and also stomach conditions and all these sorts of more serious things. Sure. But also he seems like someone that did really grapple with the idea of like, what is this success? And like, he seems like someone, from talking to people that knew him too, that would have been much happier to just ultimately have been in a band kind of the size of like a Husker Du, or like, something a little more tangible, because at the end of the day, like you're saying, like if you're in a band and at a certain level and you fuck up and you tank your career, you're not just tanking your career, you're tanking so many people's lives around you. There's so many people that are dependent on someone, just you going out and making music after a certain point, that I can only imagine how much pressure that was for him to try and stop doing things.
No, oh my God, I can't imagine. But then also, like, when he died, the way that people reacted was to deify him. And I don't want to be speaking out of turn here, but that seems to be the exact behavior that gave him so much internal conflict, is to be deified in that way. And so I think it's like, sure, I have to think about not only my life, but the livelihoods of my band and my team and my manager, my crew. I also have to think about the things that I have less and less control over the more quote unquote successful that I get, which is how people take the window into my life that is my artist persona and what they use it for in their own life. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. I can't imagine, especially if you're a person who comes out of a scene with that's tied up in a lot of principles. It's got to be overwhelming. I mean, I am experiencing like 1/1000th of that recognition, and it's a lot for me to think about how I'm stewarding a platform and like what I need to say and what I need to do to contribute something meaningful to this world. And I think that's a lot to expect of people. And that's like the reason why, I don't know, small shows. I don't want to ever be one of those people who's like, I don't know, kind of stuck in the past or like always wishing for the good old days, what have you. But I think, artists play undersells in small shows and in stores and secret shows Maybe because there is an intuitive longing to be able to be closer to the people hearing your music, to have it be the communal experience it once was, instead of this gulf existing between performer and artist. So, you know, I wonder if a lot of my music is just like trying to understand myself better, and performing it is almost like imploring people to better understand me, because human beings long for understanding. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that give and take is maybe easier to observe or feel in a smaller context, you know? But who knows?
Yeah, well, it's like that, the idea of like this thing becoming like some sort of doctrine that you carry with you your whole life, you know, like the idea that, you know, we all talk about this guilt, you know, that we have, and this idea that, like, you know, we want to find a way to absolve ourselves of the guilt of success. And like, I've got friends from other, you know, musical backgrounds, and they don't carry it in the same way that people that came out of this background carry it. Like, you know, I'm sure there's some that do, obviously, and different people's situations, but I find like, if you don't know who Ian MacKaye is, you can't have that little Ian MacKaye sitting on your shoulder.
Yep. Yeah. No, I seriously, and yeah, I wonder too, like, if those people feel trapped by the standards that they espoused like so vehemently in their youth and early in their career, that now have had to grow. You know what I mean? Like, I can't really think of one side without the other, but it is something very unique to punk, and I wouldn't trade it. Like, there's so many mechanisms of my life, or like experiences I've had, that are tied in with guilt, like, hello, Christianity. But I wouldn't trade growing up in the punk scene, because at its core, and I think I had the extreme privilege of being in a really like posy punk scene that was very specific about like friendship and community and mutual aid. I wouldn't trade that. I think it informs what is even gratifying to me about music, and gives me, I don't know, the relief of knowing it's not something I can own, or something that is like individual to myself.
But it's also like, it's bigger than any of the participants. Like, you know, much, you know, like, you know, some people in religion, obviously religious leaders in some cases, like, we're failed by our punk leaders constantly.
Totally.
You know, but yet their work in punk, their texts that they created in punk, are more important than them. You know, like, punk will survive despite the failing of its leaders. It will survive despite the fact that we have problematic texts that are considered part of the canon of punk rock. You know, like, I will interpret Bodies as a pro-choice song on Nevermind the Bollocks, in spite of the fact that the more you learn about Johnny Lydon, it probably wasn't necessarily as progressive as I'm hoping to read it as.
Exactly. Yeah, but then it's like, and it's weird because yesterday I had a conversation with this like folk country-ish artist, this singer-songwriter named Katie Pruitt. She does a podcast about like reconciling queerness with like religious trauma, and what we talked about was basically the same thing that you're saying right now, about how like punk becomes dangerous, or not dangerous, but like stratified and exclusionary whenever someone believes that they have the empirical rubric of what makes something punk and what doesn't.
Absolutely.
The cool thing about punk is that its definition is constantly evolving through the discourse we have around it. through what all of the musicians within the scene and who have come from the scene are pouring back into it. And that makes me happy. Like, I mean, and when we talk about, like, the scene, I don't know, it's like when I was growing up in Memphis, I guess there wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't like being in Seattle in the 90s or being in New York in the 80s or being in LA in the whatever. Like, it wasn't this complete renaissance that was associated with a very specific sound or whatever, like hip-hop in Atlanta in the early 2000s or in whatever. It was so much like the scene didn't really have its own personality outside of everyone desperately needing each other in order to make shows happen for whatever your music sounded like. And that's what, I don't know, I guess when I think of myself as within the scene now, it's just that, like, the scene got bigger, and that's fine with me. You know, I want more people to have a seat at the table, and I want the scene to be more inclusive. So I don't really subscribe to the monolith definition of punk or the exclusionary definition of punk. I prefer it to be this, like, ongoing discourse.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you bring up the fact that it is like an evolving thing, and it is something that, like, very much, you know, like when it gets too dogmatic, like look at people bring it up on the show all the time, Los Angeles, and when things started shifting to becoming all hardcore, and you had all this diversity literally chased out of the scene with violence.
Yeah.
And it's when it becomes like people become too, I don't know, fundamentalist about it. That's when you start having kids in casualty shirts harassing kids listening to Green Day at the mall.
I love it. I love that you remembered that story. That's one of my favorite stories.
One of the best stories ever told. Yeah.
I was just like, why? This is the closest thing I have. Well, and also I think it's like often otherness or insecurity breeds a desire to express superiority over someone else.
Yeah.
And that's like, yeah, I don't know. I found that with, I was straight edge for a long time. Like, we didn't even touch on this, and I will probably have to go in a minute, but
yeah, whatever. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine.
It's
fine. I could talk to you for so damn long. I was supposed to do, like,
I get it. No
errands with my partner, now boring life admin shit. But I was gonna say, and I wanted to talk to you about this too, because I was straight edge when I spoke to you last, and then I swung over into this other side of the spectrum in being completely entrenched in substance abuse for like a year. But now I don't identify as straight edge at all because of, and also I think this has a lot to do with, last time we talked about Southern metalcore and how I think that genre, that niche genre, sprung up because there were a lot of people being othered for whatever reason. Or like that wanted to be alt and have tattoos and gauges and stuff, that felt like they still wanted to participate in a religious tradition, or they still had questions about what God is or who God is. And the thing about that, though, is like it just became, for a lot of bands, not all bands went this way. Like, I'm really proud of how Me Without You handled their career and how they speak about God, but there's certainly people who I think become collapsed with their identity as their personhood. And like when your identity is being a Christian band, right? Or like being a straight edge band. There's almost like a purity culture, superiority complex that goes along with that. It's like, you know, whatever. I'm in a Christian band. I'm trying to save souls out here at this at this beatdown hardcore show, or like, you know, I'm a straight edge person. I'm trying to make music about how I choose not to poison my body with substances, and I am purer or cleaner or clearer minded than other people who let themselves be controlled by alcohol or whatever. And as much as I think it was useful to me, like for a time when I was in college, to really dive deep into the history of straight edge culture and use that to prop up the sobriety I was maintaining, I also think it can be, I mean, it is straight up a violent culture. Like, whether or not I experienced that personally, or whether or not any of the people I knew that identified as straight edge were like that, I cannot deny that in aligning myself with this culture, I am also complicit in excusing violence. Because, you know,
yeah,
like,
oh no, definitely.
That's and that's kind of how I feel about the church now. It's like, yeah, I can align myself with the parts of this that are still meaningful to me and that taught me valuable lessons about my life, but I absolutely cannot categorize myself nominally with this institution or with this like cult following subgroup that has actually inflicted a lot of pain and propagated a lot of violence towards others. Yeah, like, it's just hearing you talk about the LA hardcore scene and the Casualties guy makes me think of, I think a lot of people come to punk because they feel othered and they want to be around people that will accept them, but so often that turns into an oppositional resentment and like a counter othering. That's not a word yet. But
yeah, no,
like,
I get it.
you know what I'm talking about though.
Yeah.
And I think that's toxic.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Oh, definitely. Like, that's the other thing that I think, you know, I hope comes across on this show, that like, you know, there's a tendency to celebrate things, and because of historical distance or whatever, you know, like we jokingly talk about Gigi Allen, but like, you get down to it, that guy was a monster. Like, what he did is inexcusable. And like, yet it's kind of like almost humorous now. Like, it's like this like punchline, because it's so shocking. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, we can't ever forget the fact that like, fuck, Proud Boys come out of punk rock. Like, as much as there's all this amazing shit that comes out of it, there's also this fucking absolutely heinous shit that these people that out of insecurity, whatever, were drawn to it and took it the complete wrong way. And that's the other thing, like, I think that's, you know, makes it like religion in that sense, that you have this idea that there will be people that will misinterpret the doctrine at every stage. And it's almost like the battle for like, what is this thing?
Yeah, totally. Well, and then I mean, it's like, what are you supposed to do? I said all this stuff about, you know, I used to be a person who literally, I gave a PowerPoint at a Christian conference that was like the gospel through a punk lens, and it was like all these pictures of youth of today, and being like, we should live in community with each other, supporting each other, like all this like posy punk stuff. But dude, what do I think like the institution of religion is even, you know, historically, like the purpose it served in civilizations, what is it for? It's like an accountability system for each other. So it's like, man, I just wish, like, I don't know, I wish Casualties guy had somebody in his life being like, you don't have to be insecure about it.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I had a whole bunch of people in my life that were older than me that when I would say something judgmental to try to like fit in or to like shit on a band that was bad, that would kind of course correct me and be like, well, you know, like, you don't have to be so judgmental. It doesn't make them less. It just means that you don't like their music as much, or you don't connect with it like other people do. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really grateful to be in this conversation with you. Like, honestly, I think it's such important work that you do to make and hold a space for this discourse where we can continue to renegotiate what does this thing even mean. It means something different to virtually everyone you have on the show, and that's the fun of it, you know?
Well, I'm grateful that you were here, because this has been one of I don't know, like one of the best conversations I've ever gotten to have for a podcast or not. And anytime you want to come here, like I've kept you for so long, and honestly, like everything you say leads me to want to continue this thing. So I'm just gonna, at respect for the rest of your life, say, please come back, Julien, anytime you want. One last thing is Hardline.
I will. Thank you for having me.
Sorry, I meant no. I'm going to leave it at
no.
that.
Go ahead.
No, I'm going to leave it at that.
No. Ask about Hardline. I feel like I know what you're about to ask, and I would like to answer it.
Okay. Last time we talked, the last question I asked you was about the X's on Boy Genius being a reference to Straight Edge, and I was wondering this time, is Hardline at all a reference to Hardline?
For sure.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that song is about. Just I'll be short, but that song is about re-entering a relationship with substance abuse that very quickly became unhealthy. And then having to, because I had already started to kind of like question what was the motivation for me being straight edge at this point anymore? Like, was it something about my ego? Was it a superiority complex? Was it actually serving my health? And I wrote that song because I was like, wow, yeah, I spent so much time identifying as this like hardcore, hardline straight edge vegan person, and very much categorizing myself in that subculture. And then when I was unable to maintain sobriety any longer, I felt absolutely crushed, and I felt this horrible imposter syndrome, and it took me a really long time to kind of reconcile just with that as a part of my identity. And it's not supposed to be like a diss song to straight edge culture. It's just supposed to be kind of like a dark joke with myself that I identified as straight edge so long, and then I ended up writing this song about how weak I felt and how much of a failure I felt like I was when I was in a bad way again. And I don't know, for me it's been a lot about the removal of shame and trying to think of it less as weakness. But yeah, that is definitely a reference to hardline straight edge culture.
Okay, well, I could definitely go a million places from here, so I will just go one place, which is thank you again, Julien, for coming on this show.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. It is always so nourishing to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julien, for coming on the show, or coming back on the show. And Julien will be back for a part 3. And we'll go for the record. We were close. We were very close to making the longest Turn It Up Punk episode ever. I think we're still beaten by Robbie Brookside part 2 and Bill Hader part 1. But Julien's coming back for that crown. She said it afterwards, you know? Anyway, thank you, Julien. That was incredible. Thank you for the conversation. And also incredible is Little Oblivions, available now on Matador Records, everywhere. Everywhere you get records. Every single place you get records, you will find this record. I hope. It should be that way. It should be. Speaking of should, you should definitely come back to this show later on over this weekend, because coming up on this show, we have a legend from the band Face to Face. Trevor Keith is here, and he talks about his kind of unusual journey getting into punk rock. It's a really fun conversation. I'm very, very excited for you to hear it. And that is coming up in a kind of a few short days for the show. Anyway, that is it. Remember, as always, Black Lives Matter. The lives of Indigenous people matter. We need to protect trans kids, and we need to help trans people protect themselves. And there needs to be a stop of violence towards Asian people. Get involved, get informed, go out there, read, volunteer. There's just so much shit going on. There's really no end to where your mind and your effort should go right now, because yeah, it gets a little bleak sometimes, but we all got to get together and just smash fascism. Just stand up and stand up for people, because these aren't political issues. These are just like human rights issues. Everyone deserves the right to just live in peace, and that's really what we're trying to do here. Go out and do something creative, make something. You don't have to do something to show the rest of the world, but just do something for yourself. Create your own culture. Do whatever it takes. Make a fanzine, start a podcast, start a band. Just draw a picture. You just draw a picture for yourself. Just, try it. Try it. Try meditating. I've been trying it. I've been talking about it. It still works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Who knows? Who knows? Sign your organ donor cards, because by the time they come looking for those organs, you don't need them. You don't need them. And wear a mask, stay distant, and stay safe. And we'll get through it. We'll get through it. All right. See you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to check out Oil and Flowers with Buddha Blaze and myself. Big 420 party coming up. And check it out. Check out more details on Oil and Flowers. I think that's it.